Imagine this. You wake to the sound of crashing waves and the creak of wood beneath your feet. The air smells of salt, sweat, and cold iron. Around you, men with braided beards and axes, their faces lit by dawn's red light. You think you're aboard a ship of myth? In truth, you're standing among the first explorers of the unknown, the Vikings, children of wind and steel. But before we sail with them, listen, the world they were born from was already ancient, and it whispered to them through the howl of the wind. The North was a forge. It shaped its people the way ice sculpts stone, slowly, mercilessly, beautifully. The land itself was a test. Mountains of gray rock rose like the bones of gods. Forests stretched endless, black and whispering. Winters came not as seasons but as sieges, lasting so long that spring felt like a rumor. To live here was to wrestle with hunger and cold until your body learned both obedience and defiance. The North did not coddle, it carved. And in that carving, it made something rare, people who could look at the endless horizon and not flinch. You can almost see them, can't you? A lone figure walking through the snow, fur cloak heavy with frost. His breath steams in the morning air as he trudges toward a longhouse at the edge of a fjord. The sea beyond is black glass, cracked by drifting ice. Inside the hall, firelight dances on carved beams. Shadows of men and women sway across the walls. Warriors, farmers, storytellers, all gathered close around the hearth. Someone strikes a harp string. Someone else speaks. It begins not as a tale, but as an invocation, a song older than memory. They sing of Odin, the wanderer with one eye, of Thor, who guards mankind with thunder, of Loki, the trickster who laughs at the edge of doom. These were not distant gods but kin, wild, flawed, magnificent, reflections of themselves. Every raid, every voyage, every death was woven into this great tapestry of myth and blood. The fire cracks. Sparks rise into the smoke hole and vanish into the cold night beyond. A child listens wide-eyed as the elders tell how the world began, not in light, but in ice. They speak of Ginnungagap, the yawning void, and how fire met frost to birth creation itself. From that chaos came the first giant, Ymir, and from his body the gods shaped the world. His skull became the sky, his blood the oceans, his bones the mountains. Even now, the people of the North believe they lived inside that corpse, upon a world still echoing with the heartbeat of its making. Is it any wonder they were restless? When you grow up in a land built from the body of a dead god, the horizon calls differently. The sea isn't a boundary, it's a promise. Outside, the wind rises. You can hear it through the gaps in the longhouse walls, a low animal moan. The men glance toward the door. The sea is speaking again, and the Vikings, though they do not yet call themselves that, listen. Somewhere beyond the fjord, beyond the edge of the known, lies the realm of wonder and danger, Jotunheim, the land of giants. Or maybe something else, lands no saga has yet named. They feel it in their bones, the pull to go. To leave the safety of the hearth, to chase whatever lies past the gray horizon. But to sail in those days was to defy reason itself. The ocean was a god too, and a cruel one. It swallowed whole villages without warning. It could turn a bright morning into black chaos in a single breath. Yet the people of the North were born watching the waves crash against stone, watching gulls wheel over distant waters. They knew fear, but they also knew that fear was a compass. So, they built their dreams from timber and iron. They learned to speak the language of the sea, the shift of wind, the curl of foam, the taste of salt on the air before a storm. Every boy was taught to row before he could read, to tie knots before he could count. Their stories, their prayers, even their lullabies were filled with the rhythm of the oar. And beneath it all pulsed one idea, soft and terrible. The gods themselves had crossed the sea once. Why shouldn't they? By torchlight, the storytellers whisper of men who vanished into mist, sailors who chased the sun and never returned, who found lands where trees dripped with silver and beasts spoke with human tongues. No one knows if they lived or died, but their names endure like echoes across the fjords. You step outside into the cold. The night is endless. Above you, the stars hang low and sharp, so bright they seem to sing. The aurora unfurls across the sky, green and violet curtains of ghost light. The people here say it is the reflection of Valkyrie armor as they ride to gather the dead. You watch in silence, and for a moment, you understand how belief could become breath, how myth could become map. Somewhere far below that shimmering sky, a black ship waits on the shore. Its hull is curved like a serpent's spine. Its dragon-headed prow stares into the dark with open jaws. Men move about her deck, tightening ropes, checking sails. The air smells of tar, pine, and destiny. A voice calls out, deep, commanding. The chieftain. His cloak is trimmed with wolf fur, his beard streaked with frost. He does not speak of conquest or glory, he speaks of necessity. The harvest was poor. The sea ice came early. The gods demand tribute. They must find new lands or die in their own hunger. The crew nods, wordless. They know the truth. Every voyage is both a raid and a prayer. You can almost hear the splash of oars entering the dark water, the groan of the ship as it pushes off from land. The village grows small behind them, a few scattered fires against the endless night. The mountains watch in silence. Somewhere in that black distance, lightning flickers on the horizon like a god's warning, or invitation. And just like that, legend begins to move. The Norse would later call it faring north, south, east, and west. To us, it became the Viking Age, a storm of sails, a tide of ambition that swept across continents. But in this moment, it is simply this, a handful of men, hearts hammering, rowing into the unknown. You stand on the shore, watching the longship fade into mist, and you realize this is how history starts. Not with the comfortable, the cautious, the safe, but with the restless. The wind rises again, colder now, and carries their voices away, shouts, laughter, songs of gods and home. Soon there will be more ships, more journeys, more names etched into the sagas. For now, only the sea remains, wide and merciless and full of promise. And somewhere out there, beyond sight, the first glimmer of a new world waits, unseen, unimaginable, inevitable. The wind carries them onward, those dark, narrow ships with their dragon heads cutting through the fog, until the sea itself begins to breathe with them. For a long while, there is only the rhythm of the oars, the hiss of waves against wood, and the low murmur of men speaking in the tongue of the north. Words shaped by cold air and long silences. And then, far in the distance, land. Not a myth this time, but the steep cliffs and gray beaches of home. The longships glide into narrow fjords where waterfalls thread down mountainsides like liquid glass. Smoke rises from the valley, hearths, forges, kitchens alive with life. The men disembark, their boots sinking into wet earth, their hands touching stone, rope, and soil with a familiarity that borders on reverence. You might imagine them all as raiders, stormers of monasteries, burners of villages. That's what legend has taught us. But stand here among them, and you see something different. You see hands that have swung axes not just in battle, but to fell trees for shelter, to build, to shape, to survive. Because for every sword the North forged, it made 100 plows. And for every raider who crossed the sea, there were 10 who stayed behind, planting, weaving, carving, and keeping the fragile heartbeat of life alive against the long winter. The village is a cluster of longhouses huddled beneath the mountain like beasts gathered for warmth. Their roofs are thick with turf, smoke curls from holes cut into the ridge. The scent of peat and roasting fish fills the air. Children run barefoot through mud, laughing, their cheeks red with the sting of cold. Women bend over cauldrons, stirring broth made of barley, onions, and the last dried meat from the year's hunt. Dogs bark near the pens. Goats bleat. Chickens scuttle through the straw. This This is the true world of the Viking Age. Not endless conquest, but endurance. Not fire and pillage, but rhythm and ritual. A people living in tempo with the seasons, bending their will to the same harsh elements that birthed them. Inside one of the halls, warmth hits you like a tide. It smells of wool, smoke, and pine resin. Carvings twist across the beams, serpents, runes, the marks of gods and stories. A woman sits by the fire, spinning flax into thread. Her fingers move quick and sure, weaving life from nothing. Across from her, a boy mends a fishing net. His father is away, sailing with the summer crew, and it's the boy's turn to keep the home strong. He hums softly, an old tune, one that carries the rhythm of oars. You realize then that this society was not divided by the simple lines history later drew. Every warrior was a farmer in spring, a trader in summer, a poet in winter. Each man and woman wore many skins, as shifting as the sea itself. They were not merely fighters. They were craftsmen, blacksmiths, storytellers, healers. Their longships were not just weapons of war, but bridges, bringing furs, amber, iron, and ivory from the edges of the world. The same hand that could hurl a spear could carve a brooch delicate as lace. The same lips that roared in battle could recite verses of such aching beauty they were believed to please the gods. Listen. In the longhouse, a skald begins to sing. His voice is low, rising like smoke. He sings of the All-Father who hung 9 nights upon the world tree, sacrificing himself to himself for wisdom. He sings of the wolf that waits at the world's end, and of men, simple men, who carve their names upon fate with courage alone. Every word is a map, every story a weapon against the dark. Outside, life continues in its quiet pulse. A farmer tests the edge of his plowshare, squinting at the light. The soil is thin, stony, reluctant, but he knows it, coaxing grain from it with the patience of generations. His wife lays out fish to dry, a daily ritual that smells of salt and wind. Their eldest son checks the fence. Their youngest, too small to work, chases a chicken with more hope than sense. It is an ordinary day, and that's precisely what makes it sacred. At the edge of the field, you spot another figure, a young woman standing beside a flat-topped stone. She's tracing runes into it with the tip of a knife. Her braids are bound with silver rings, her cloak clasped with a brooch shaped like a crescent moon. When she speaks, her voice is soft, but steady, reciting something between a prayer and a poem. You draw closer. The runes she carves aren't a name, but a record. Her brother sailed east with a trade ship bound for the lands of the Russ, the river routes that lead through forests, and into the heart of what will one day be Russia. She's marking his journey in stone, a promise that he will be remembered whether he returns or not. That's the heart of it. The Norse did not carve monuments to victory. They carved memory. They believed that life was brief, but words could be eternal. That to be forgotten was the only true death. And so, even in stillness, they moved through their days with a kind of urgency. Not frantic, but aware. The North teaches that every harvest might be the last, every voyage the final one. That understanding burned in them like a hidden coal, shaping the way they lived, the way they loved. At night, when the chores are done and the animals fed, the hall fills again with laughter and smoke. Someone pours mead, honey sweet, warm in the throat. The light flickers across faces as they share news from distant coasts. A friend who's settled in Ireland, a cousin who trades silk in Miklagard, Constantinople. The world, you realize, was already a web, and these people were its threads. One man speaks of sailing down the Volga, seeing markets where Arab merchants sell spices and glass. Another boasts that he's been to the edge of Francia, where the rivers shine with silver and churches ring like hammers. Someone laughs, calls him a liar. Someone else toasts him anyway. It's not the truth that matters here, but the telling. For in the telling, they travel again. Even the women join in, not silent spectators, but voices strong and teasing. One jokes about her husband's beard being a better nest for lice than the henhouse. The others roar with laughter. The world outside may think of them as subservient, but here, in their own hall, power flows in quieter ways through wit, through work, through the keeping of kin. A mother's hand steered the fate of a family as surely as a helmsman's rudder steers a ship. You can almost feel the pulse of it, a balance between violence and tenderness, between creation and destruction. These were not contradictions to them. They were the rhythm of life itself. Even their gods mirrored this truth. Odin was a warrior and a poet. Thor, a protector and a brute. Freya, a lover and a sorceress. They were divine contradictions, and their people learned to live the same way. They could build a ship from a single oak and burn a monastery with the same hands. They could recite poetry about beauty while covered in the blood of battle. They could worship gods of war and still pause to feed the ravens. This complexity, this wholeness, was their secret strength. It made them unpredictable, unstoppable. It made them human. As the night deepens, the skald's voice softens. The fire burns low. Men drift to sleep where they sit, heads against the walls, arms still around mugs of mead. Outside, the wind shifts, carrying the smell of snow from the mountains. You step into the cold again. Above, the stars blaze in their silent procession. Somewhere to the north, a dog barks. Somewhere to the west, waves crash against unseen shores. You stand there a long time, listening to the land breathe, feeling how life in this world is bound not by borders but by the elements: wind, sea, fire, stone. And as you listen, the question rises quietly, insistently. If these people could build a life from so little, from frost, salt, and silence, what might they build when they finally turn their eyes beyond the horizon? The longships will sail again soon. You can sense it in the air, in the way men glance toward the sea even as they tend their fields. The hunger has not left them. The need to see what lies beyond the line where sky and water meet. To trade, to raid, to explore, it is all the same instinct, just different faces of the same God. Somewhere, deep in the hall, a newborn cries. The sound is thin, human, defiant. A new voice in the world. And you understand, every voyage begins like this, with a single breath drawn in the dark. The world beyond the fjord is waiting. And the north, fierce mother that it is ready to let her children go. Morning breaks like a blade drawn slow from its sheath. The fjord gleams under pale light, a mirror of steel and mist. The village is awake before the sun climbs the ridge, not with noise, but with the low, purposeful hum of people who know that time and weather wait for no one. From the heights, you can see them gathering on the shore, figures moving among hulls that gleam with frost and tar. They walk between them like priests tending sacred beasts, each ship resting on its cradle of logs, its ribs naked to the dawn. This is where myth becomes craft. To the Vikings, ships were not built. They were born. Each one a living creature, shaped from the forest's bones, given breath by the sea. Step closer. Listen. An axe swings, a clean, sure sound. The ring of iron on wood. Chips fly, pale against the dark earth. The shipwright works barehanded though the air bites like knives. He feels the grain beneath his fingers, the hidden veins of the oak. He knows, by touch alone, which way the wood wishes to bend. No blueprints. No rulers. Only instinct, experience, and faith. The same faith you might give to prayer. The logs are split, steamed, and shaped, their edges curved to meet like the ribs of an animal. Iron rivets clink as they're driven home, each one a heartbeat. Tar thick as blood is brushed into seams, sealing the new vessel's skin. These men are as much artists as they are engineers. The longship must be strong enough to face the open sea yet light enough to carry over land. It must slice the waves and ride the rivers, glide across the wind's teeth and still find the strength to return. They say the first ships were dreamed by the gods themselves, inspired by the serpent Jormungandr who circles the world beneath the ocean. Look at the prow of the one before you, carved into the likeness of a dragon's head, jaws open, eyes wide, its tongue curling like a flame. Not mere decoration. A guardian. A warning. When the ship meets the horizon, it will not look like wood and rope. It will look alive, a dragon flying over the sea, carrying men upon its back. You walk along the shore as the work continues. The scent of pine tar fills the air. The rhythmic hammering becomes a kind of chant. Children carrying nails in leather pouches. Old men sharpen tools with slow, practiced strokes. Even women help, sewing the great wool sails, their needles flashing in the light. Every stitch holds a prayer against the storm. The sails themselves are dyed red, not for beauty, but for power. Against the gray of the sea, a red sail is a heartbeat, a defiance, a sign that the north remembers its fire. When the wind fills them, they will thunder like wings. By midday, the ship is nearly ready. The villagers gather around, eyes shining. The chieftain steps forward with a cup of mead. He pours it over the prow, murmuring words in the old tongue, words that smell of smoke and salt, meant to bless the vessel and bind it to the fate of its crew. "May the sea bear you gently," he says. "May the wind fill your sails. May you bring back more stories than graves." The mead drips down the carved dragon's snout, catching the light like gold. They name the ship Skirfera, Skyfarer. And then, with a heave of shoulders and a cry that rolls like thunder, they push. Logs spin, ropes tighten, and slowly the ship slides toward the waiting water. The moment her keel kisses the sea, the crowd cheers. The dragon breathes. You step aboard. The deck is narrow, lined with shields hung along the sides like the scales of some great beast. The holes gape, ready for the rhythm of men's arms. In the center stands the mast, thick as a warrior's leg, rising to meet the wind. The ship rocks beneath you, light, alive. You understand now why the Vikings loved them so fiercely. On land, a man is bound by mud and mountain. At sea, he is free, small but unchained. The steersman runs his hand along the tiller, carved from ash. His touch is gentle, almost tender. "She'll ride like a gull," he murmurs. And when he says, "she," he means it. Every ship is a woman. A mother, a lover, a spirit of the waves. They speak to her as if she listens. Some say they do. The crew gathers their gear, axes, spears, food wrapped in linen, barrels of water, skins of mead. Their shields bear painted sigils, suns, serpents, ravens. Each symbol is a promise, protection, luck, memory. When all is ready, the chieftain climbs aboard, his boots thudding on the planks. The sail is raised. It flaps once, twice, then fills, the wind catching it like a hand taking hold. The longship slides forward. Smooth. Effortless. The fjord opens before them, silver and endless. Mountains fall away on either side. The oars dip and rise in perfect rhythm, 30 men moving as one. The sound of it is hypnotic, the splash of blades, the groan of wood, the low chant they sing to keep time. The world narrows to sky and sea. The air is salt and freedom. To the Norse, the ship was more than a tool, it was a philosophy. To sail was to live on the edge between worlds. To balance life and death on the tip of a prow. The ocean was their road, their refuge, their church. When a great warrior died, he was given back to the sea in the same way he had lived, aboard his ship. They would set him upon it, armor gleaming, sword at his side. The vessel would be set aflame, the sail catching like a torch. Flames would curl up the mast, sparks flying into the dark. And as the ship drifted away, burning against the horizon, the people would whisper that his spirit was sailing to Valhalla, to join the gods across the sky. Even their graves were ships. Because to a Viking, the journey never ends. It only changes shape. As the longship cuts through the fjord, you watch how the men move. Each one knows his place. The steersman at the stern, the lookout at the bow, the helmsman calling rhythm. There is no idle talk, no wasted gesture. These are people whose lives depend on precision. The sea is calm today, but they treat it like a living thing, unpredictable, moody, sacred. Every shift of wind, every twitch of the sail, every shimmer on the water's surface means something. The helmsman squints, adjusts the tiller slightly, and the ship responds at once. You begin to feel it too, that invisible connection between wood and water, man and wind. After hours of rowing, the sail catches a stronger gust. The oars are pulled in. The ship leans slightly, and suddenly it's flying, slicing across the surface so fast that spray stings your face like needles. The men laugh, shouting over the roar. Someone begins to sing again, a deep, wordless melody that feels older than the world. This is what freedom sounds like. By evening, they beach the ship on a stony shore to rest. The crew drags her above the tide line, sets up camp nearby. They cook fish over open flame, trade stories of strange lands and stranger gods. One man swears he saw whales as long as fortresses. Another claims the stars themselves shift when the gods are angry. You sit beside the fire and glance back at the ship, dark against the fading light. Her dragon head gleams red in the glow, eyes seeming to watch the horizon even as the crew sleeps. You understand now, she isn't just a vessel. She's a mirror of the people who made her, fierce, graceful, restless, unafraid of the deep. When morning comes, the tide returns, lifting her gently. The crew rises, stretches, and climbs aboard once more. The sail unfurls like the wing of some ancient creature. And as the wind fills it, the ship turns west, toward mystery, toward promise, toward destiny. You stand at the water's edge as they vanish into the mist, the song of the oars fading with the light. The sea swallows them, then grows still again. The world holds its breath. Somewhere beyond the horizon, new lands wait, unseen, unimagined. And the dragons of the north are coming to find them. The horizon is gray and silent, but the men aboard the longship feel it. The subtle tilt of the wind, the faint shift of current, the call of something unseen. They have sailed this coast 100 times, raiding, trading, returning home, yet now their eyes linger longer on the western edge of the world. Beyond that line, they whisper, there are more lands. Islands, perhaps. Maybe even the end of everything. But when has that ever stopped them? It begins with curiosity and hunger. Not greed for gold, though there is always that, but a deeper hunger, for space, for stories, for proof that the gods did not place limits upon men. The north is growing crowded now. Fjords echo with too many voices. Clans quarrel over grazing lands and inheritance. A younger generation, fierce and restless, dreams of somewhere else, somewhere they might claim with their own hands. The old men warn them. The sea takes what it's owed. The young reply, then we'll pay in courage. And so they begin to prepare. The longships are stocked again, barrels of dried fish, sacks of barley, skins of mead. The women who stay behind tie small charms to the mast, bits of woven wool, carved runes for safe passage. Children chase the surf until the tide pulls them back. Then the oars bite water, the sail fills, and the fjord's walls slip away behind them. They follow the sun west, where daylight stretches long across the sea like a road of silver. The air grows colder, salter. Days blur into nights, nights into fog. The sea becomes a language they know by instinct, each wave a word, each wind a breath. You can feel it, the awe and fear tangled together like ropes. The ocean is alive. It heaves beneath the hull, unpredictable as a god's mood. Some days it's smooth and gleaming, a polished shield. Other days it rises like a beast, roaring, hurling spray over the deck until even the strongest man feels small. They navigate not by compass, but by signs written in the world itself, the flight of seabirds, the smell of kelp, the pattern of waves. The sun by day, the stars by night. They read the sky the way monks read scripture. And always, when clouds close in, they trust the ravens. The birds are their compass, dark wings cutting through the mist. When land is near, the ravens will circle back. When it isn't, they fly forward into the unknown. One morning, after days of nothing but sea and gray, a cry goes up. Land! At first, it's only a smudge on the horizon, a darker gray against the light. But as the hours pass, it grows sharper, a line of cliffs rising from the water, topped with ice and fog. They steer toward it, hearts hammering. The wind howls louder, as if warning them back. The waves slap the hull, cold and hard. But they press on. This is how discovery always begins, with defiance. The first to step ashore sinks his boots into wet sand. He stands there a long time, staring. The place is barren, wind-scoured rock, seabirds crying overhead, no trees in sight. The air tastes of salt and snow. He bends down, scoops a handful of earth, and lets it fall through his fingers. Iceland! Someone murmurs, island, the land of ice. It isn't much, not yet. But to men who have crossed 1,000 miles of unforgiving water, it feels like a miracle. They build cairns on the hills to mark their claim, leave offerings to the gods, coins, blood, breath. Then they sail along the coast, charting fjords, naming mountains, mapping what no one before them had dared to name. Word spreads like fire. By the next spring, more ships follow, not just warriors this time, but farmers, weavers, children. They bring sheep, cattle, and seeds. They raise their longhouses beside the black sand shores. Smoke begins to curl above the tundra. A new home, carved from ice and lava. But the Vikings are not a people who stand still for long. Iceland gives them shelter, yes, green valleys, clean rivers, a place to breathe. But even here, the western horizon burns in their dreams. Fishermen talk of strange sightings. Birds that nest on islands beyond sight, driftwood washed ashore from forests unknown, stories of a great land where the sun never sets in summer. One of them, Floki, known for his temper and his ravens, decides to see for himself. He sails from Iceland with 3 ships, following the birds once more into fog and silence. Weeks pass. Ice closes in around them. The sea hisses and groans, its voice thick with menace. They lose one ship to the storms, another to rocks. Still, Floki presses on. And when the fog finally breaks, there it is, a vast coast gleaming white beneath the sun. They name it Greenland, Greenland, though it's more snow than green. Hope needs a little light to stay alive, after all. Standing on that alien shore, Floki feels both triumph and sorrow. The land is harsh, colder than even the north he left behind. But he smiles anyway. Because what matters is not the comfort of the ground beneath him, but the fact that it exists, that he reached it, that there is always something beyond. He builds a cairn of stones, offers thanks to the gods, and sails home to tell the tale. When he returns to Iceland, the people gather around him like moths to firelight. He speaks of glaciers and herds of seals, of mountains so high they pierce the clouds, of the sun that never truly dies in summer. Some call him mad. Others call him blessed. But all of them listen. Because beneath every story of hardship, they hear the same whisper, there is more. And that whisper spreads. More ships follow. Families pack their lives into the hulls of longboats, goats bleating, babies crying, hopes trembling like sails. They set off into that same cold blue silence, chasing the horizon. Some die along the way. Others vanish entirely, swallowed by storms or ice. But a few survive, carving new settlements into the edges of Greenland's fjords. The colonies are small, fragile. They live by hunting seal and walrus, by trading furs and ivory back east. They pray to Thor and Christ alike, hedging their bets between old gods and new. And when winter comes, when the nights stretch on forever and the ice locks them in, they gather around their hearths and tell the story of Floki, and of the land beyond even Greenland, the one they call Vinland, the land of meadows. the land of promise. They speak of it in half-believing tones, as if saying the name too loudly might call it from the mist. But among them sits a boy with eyes like his father's, sharp, curious, restless. His name is Leif. He listens to every word, tracing invisible maps across the air with his finger. And in his mind, the horizon shifts once more, further, wider, west. The sea has not finished with the north, nor have the Northmen finished with the sea. The wind picks up, rustling the grass outside the hall. Somewhere, a ship creaks in its mooring, restless as a living thing. The tide is turning again, and with it, the story. The first journeys west were only the beginning. The world is changing, and the edge of the map is no longer enough. The sea around Iceland is gray again, restless. A storm is building far off, one of those long, low swells that announce itself not with thunder, but with a change in the air, a deepening of the horizon. The people who live here can feel it before it comes. The smell of the wind, the way gulls fly low over the waves, the stillness that gathers like breath before the blow. It's the year 982, or thereabout. Dates mean little out here. Only seasons matter. And this season begins with a man being cast out. His name is Eirik Orvaldsson, Eric, son of Thorvald, though soon the world will know him by another name. His hair burns bright as fox fur, and his temper matches it. In the sagas they'll call him Eric the Red, for both the color of his beard and the color of the trouble that always follows him. You can picture him now, broad-shouldered, wrapped in a salt-stiff cloak, standing before the local council, the Thing, as his neighbors shout and argue. Their voices clash like oars striking stone. Someone's dead, again. A feud over property, a fight gone too far. Eric's axe did the talking. It often did. Banishment. 3 years. That's the sentence. Not death. No one wants more blood on their hands, but exile, the crueler wound. To be cut away from kin, from warmth, from the smell of hearth smoke and bread. To have no home except what you can build or take. Eric listens without bowing his head. His eyes are cold, unreadable. When the verdict is done, he simply turns, walks to his ship, and does not look back. You follow him down to the shore. The wind is rising, tugging at his cloak. His ship waits, small crew, few supplies, but strong wood, faithful design. The dragon head at its prow seems to grin, as if it knows something the rest of the world does not. He says nothing as they push off. The oars dig deep. The sea opens wide. Behind him, Iceland fades into the mist, a land of fire and law and memory. Ahead, only gray water and whatever lies beyond it. They sail north first, then west, chasing whispers. A trader once told Eric of land beyond the ice, a place seen by hunters who never returned. The stories were wild, rocks like teeth, fjords as long as a man's life, glaciers that glowed like ghosts under the midnight sun. Some said no man could live there. That was reason enough for Eric to go. Days blur. The sun barely rises, only spins around the horizon like a pale coin. The cold is constant, gnawing. Their breath freezes in their beards. The oars creak like old bones. Yet when despair begins to take hold, they see it. Mountains rising from mist, green patches clinging between them, the color of hope. Land. They steer toward it cautiously. The water here is a darker blue, heavy with ice. Seals watch them from floes, blinking slow black eyes. The coast unfurls like a wound, jagged cliffs, deep fjords, glaciers spilling down like frozen rivers. It's not welcoming, not kind. But it is real, solid underfoot, untouched. They make landfall in a bay where the air smells of salt and moss. Eric climbs a ridge and looks out over the world he's found. For a moment he says nothing. Then he laughs, a loud, wild sound that startles the gulls from the rocks. "This will do," he says. He names the place Greenland. Some say he did it to lure others there, to make it sound softer. more forgiving than it is. Maybe so. But perhaps he simply saw what he wanted to believe, a future that could be coaxed from frost, the color of possibility hiding beneath the ice. The first winter tests them all. The cold is a living thing, sharp, hungry. They huddle inside turf houses, smoke stinging their eyes, the roof creaking with snow. Nights stretch into months. Outside, wolves prowl. Inside, men dream of Iceland's hearths and wake with tears frozen in their beards. But Erik endures. He hunts seal and caribou, learns the rhythm of this new world. He studies the tides, the migrations, the strange long twilight where the sun refuses to set. And when spring returns, he sails east again, not in defeat, but in triumph. He has a story to sell. Back in Iceland, he stands before the thing once more, though now the crowd is quiet. The exile has returned, and with him, tales of a land vast and waiting. Green and rich, he tells them, free for any who dare to take it. He speaks of wide meadows, clean water, herds of seal and oxen, timber enough to build kingdoms. Some believe, some scoff. But enough feel the hunger stir, the same hunger that drove their fathers from Norway, their fathers' fathers from the mythic East. By summer, 25 ships are ready to sail. Families, livestock, hope packed tight into wooden bellies. Erik leads them west, back through the storms, back into the gray unknown. The journey breaks many. Some ships turn back. Others vanish. But those who follow Erik find land again, as promised. Fjords deep and cold, valleys where grass fights its way through the stone. They build their halls, raise turf walls, plant barley in patches of thawed earth. They trade with passing hunters, carve runes into cliffs, and watch the aurora flicker like divine fire across the night. Greenland. The name sticks. So does the dream. Erik builds his hall at Brattle. Steep slope, near what we now call Cassiersuk. The view stretches forever, ice mountains shining like silver, fjord water black as glass. He stands there often, hands clasped behind his back, a figure both proud and solitary. Exile, settler, patriarch. Red as the earth, hard as the stone, but never still. They say he grew gentler in those years. Age cooled his temper, or perhaps the ice did. He took pride in his children, Leif, Thorvald, Thorstein, and Freydis, each restless in their own way. Around the fire at night, he told them the same truth the North had taught him. The sea is not your enemy, but your mirror. It shows you what you are, if you're brave enough to look. Greenland prospered for a while. Ships came and went, bringing iron, grain, news. A small church was built. Christianity whispered its way into the fjords. Some of the settlers took to the new faith. Erik did not. I've seen what happens when men trade old gods for soft ones, he said. The wind doesn't listen to prayers. Still, when his wife Jodhild built a tiny chapel near their hall, he let her. He would stand outside on cold evenings, watching the smoke from its hearth mingle with the aurora, and though he never crossed its threshold, he did not curse it either. Perhaps even Erik the Red learned that belief is another form of navigation. Years pass. The colony endures. But always, always, there is that whisper of the West. From the mouths of hunters, traders, and storm-tossed sailors come tales of another land, warmer, richer, where grapes grow wild and timber stretches high. Leif listens, his father's fire burning behind his calm eyes. He wants to see it, to prove it, to push the map further than anyone before. One winter's night, as wind howls over the roof of Brattle, Erik sits by the fire, wrapped in furs. His beard has gone to gray, but his eyes are still fierce. Leif kneels beside him, spreading a rough map carved into driftwood, coastlines guessed, routes imagined. I'll go west, Leif says quietly. Beyond the ice. Erik studies him for a long time. The firelight flickers between them, painting father and son in the same copper glow. You'll find nothing but storms, he says at last. Maybe, Leif replies. But someone has to see what's there. The old man's mouth twitches, half scowl, half smile. You have your mother's stubbornness. And your temper, Leif says, and Erik laughs, a deep, sudden laugh that fills the hall. He claps his son on the shoulder. Then may the gods pity the sea. When Leif finally sets sail, Erik stays behind. Age, they say, or a bad fall from his horse. Some claim he saw a bad omen, a raven flying against the wind, and refused to tempt fate one last time. Others whisper he simply wanted to let his son have the glory. Whatever the truth, he watches from the shore as the ship departs, its sail red as blood against the gray sky. The wind pulls at his cloak, the surf reaches for his boots. He doesn't speak, doesn't wave. He just stands there until the dragon-headed ship vanishes into mist. That is the last the sagas say of him. But if you close your eyes, you can still see him standing there, alone at the edge of the world he made, watching the next chapter sail away. A man of exile and iron, who turned punishment into legend, who named an icebound dream Greenland and willed it to life. And somewhere beyond that horizon, his son is already steering west, into a sea that has never been charted, toward a shore no one yet believes exists. The wind changes again. The world waits. Morning breaks pale over Greenland's fjords, the light soft as breath. Frost rims the longhouses, glittering faintly like spilled salt. Inside the great hall at Brattle, embers still glow in the hearth, throwing a dull orange hue across carved beams. The hall smells of smoke, pine, and iron. Erik the Red sleeps, or pretends to. His body has grown heavy with years, but his mind remains sharp, restless, like the sea that shaped him. From his bed of furs, he hears the sounds of men outside, the dull thud of barrels being rolled, the squeal of ropes drawn tight, the soft rhythm of boots on frozen ground. He knows that sound. It is the sound of leaving. Leif stands at the doorway, fur cloak brushing the floor. His eyes are the color of winter water, gray-blue, steady, unfathomable. Around him, the morning hums with quiet purpose. His crew loads the ship, their breath misting in the air, voices low and practical. Food, tools, timber for repairs, iron nails, rope, everything accounted for? Yes, Leif. Good. Keep the meat dry this time. He smiles faintly at that. A rare thing, that smile, more like a flicker of sunlight across ice than warmth itself, but enough to show he carries none of his father's temper, only his drive. This voyage isn't born of exile or vengeance. It's born of curiosity, of something quieter yet more dangerous. The need to know. Leif has heard the stories his whole life. Sailors caught in storms who swore they saw land far to the west. Fishermen who found driftwood on the shores of Greenland, heavy, broad-grained, from trees that couldn't possibly grow in this frozen world. Tales of beaches where the grass was soft and green, where rivers ran unfrozen even in winter. He doesn't know if they're true, but something in his blood insists they are. He kneels beside his father's bed. Erik opens one eye, red-rimmed but sharp. So, he rasps, you mean to chase ghosts? Leif's voice is calm. Not ghosts. Shores. The old man studies him for a long time. Then, slowly, he nods. If there are shores, you'll find them. If there aren't. He shrugs. Then at least you'll have looked. No blessing, no farewell. Just that. It's enough. Outside, the wind is biting. The ship waits at the edge of the fjord, sleek, narrow, built for endurance. Its sail is patched but strong, dyed a deep red that catches the light like a coal. The dragon's head on the prow glares westward, as though impatient. Leif's crew gathers, 35 men, handpicked for their steadiness as much as their strength. Some are Greenlanders, born under this pale sun. Others are Icelanders who followed Erik west years before. A few are sons of Norway, men of long memory and longer grudges. Together they form a brotherhood stitched by necessity, men who trust one another not because of love, but because survival demands it. Leif gives a single nod. The oars dip, the ship glides forward, and the cold sea opens like a door. From the shore, Jodhild, Eric's wife, Leif's mother, raises a hand. Her eyes glisten, but she doesn't call out. She knows better than to speak against the sea. The first days are easy. The wind blows fair, the water calm. The men settle into the rhythm of the voyage, rowing, eating, sleeping in turns, the oars dipping in unison like the beats of a great wooden heart. At night, they sing low songs of home, half prayer, half memory, as the stars burn sharp above them. Leif spends most nights awake at the stern, watching the horizon. He marks the stars by habit, tracing invisible lines through the sky. The North Star above his shoulder, steady as fate. The glow of the aurora sometimes flickers on the edge of the world, green and ghostly, like spirits waving from the void. The air grows colder. Days blur. Ice drifts closer, silent as sleep. The sea darkens to a color beyond black. Then, one morning, fog rolls in, thick, blinding, endless. The world shrinks to the width of the ship. The men row by memory, by rhythm. They can't see the sun, only the pale glow of it diffused through the mist like the light behind a shroud. Leif doesn't panic. He has learned the sea's moods. He listens instead, to the lap of waves, the call of unseen birds, the creak of timbers. When a raven he brought from home flutters impatiently, he knows what to do. He loosens the cage and releases it. The bird rises, a black shadow swallowed by gray. They wait. When it returns, wings wet, he knows they are still far from land. But when he releases it again the next day, it does not come back. West, Leif says quietly. The men nod. They row. Hours pass. Then one of them shouts. The fog breaks apart like torn cloth, and there it is, the outline of coast, cliffs and rock and pale beaches gleaming in weak sunlight. Land. They drop anchor in a bay where flat stones stretch into the sea. The place is barren, cold, unwelcoming. Leif steps ashore and runs his hand over the rock, rough, pitted, lifeless. We'll call it Helluland, he says. The land of flat stones. They stay only a night. The wind howls through the cliffs, the surf crashes like thunder. There's no wood, no shelter. By morning, they're gone again, following the shoreline south. The next land they find is gentler, still cold, but forested. Pines crowd the hills, and rivers cut through meadows of moss. Deer tracks crisscross the sand. Leif breathes deep, the scent of resin and damp soil filling his chest. This, he says, is better. They name it Markland, the forested shore. Here they rest a while. They mend sails, hunt, gather berries. The men stretch their legs, laughing like children after too long confined. But even here, Leif feels the tug of the horizon. There is more beyond this. He can sense it. So they sail again. Days pass. The air grows warmer, the sea calmer. The sky deepens from gray to blue. The wind smells sweet, almost green. And then, one afternoon, the lookout shouts from the prow. Ahead lies a new land, softer than any they've seen. The hills are low and rolling, clothed in grass. Rivers glint in the light. Wild grapes hang from tangled vines near the shore, sweet and heavy. Leif steps onto the beach and kneels, letting the sand sift through his hands. It's warm. The soil dark and rich. He looks around, eyes wide. Vinland, he whispers. The land of wine. The men laugh, not mocking but awed. The name feels like a promise. They build small shelters along the bay, cutting timber from the trees, roofing it with turf. The air hums with insects and birdsong, a strange music after years of ice and silence. Streams run clear. Fish crowd the shallows. At night, they sit around their fires and drink mead, the sound of their voices mingling with the rustle of leaves. For the first time, the sea doesn't feel like an enemy. It feels like memory. Leif keeps watch long after the others sleep. The stars here are different, shifted somehow, lower on the horizon. He tries to name them, to fix them in his mind, but it's no use. Everything about this place is unfamiliar. It's unsettling, but beautiful. He knows they can't stay forever. The ship must return before winter. Yet part of him doesn't want to leave. This land feels possible, like a second chance written by the gods themselves. When they finally sail home, their ship is heavy with timber and stories. Leif's eyes remain fixed eastward, but his thoughts linger west. In Greenland, they greet him as if from the dead. Erik is gone now, the old wolf finally claimed by the cold. Leif stands in the doorway of the hall, staring at the empty chair by the fire, and for the first time feels truly alone. But in the quiet he smiles. His father's blood carried him far, but his own will carry him further. Beyond ice, beyond fear, beyond even the edge of the known world. He will tell them what he found, Helluland, Markland, Vinland, but words cannot capture it. Only the feeling remains, that moment when the fog broke, and the new land rose before them, green and shining like the dawn. It was not conquest that drove him, nor greed, nor hunger. It was wonder. And that, perhaps, is what makes Leif Erikson not merely a son of the North, but something larger, the first of a new kind of explorer. One who sails not away from home, but toward what home might become. When he speaks of it to the settlers, they listen as if to a saga. But none yet realize the weight of what he's done, that he has stretched the map beyond the imagination of his age. That 5 centuries from now, others will follow his path and call it discovery. For now, the world goes on as it always has. The sea freezes, the fires burn, the songs are sung. But somewhere out there, on the far side of the ocean, a fire still flickers in the grass of Vinland, and the wind that moves through those trees carries his name. The year has no number here. Only the sea keeps time. It begins with the soft groan of ropes tightening at dawn, a sound as old as breath. Frost dusts the gunwales, glittering faintly in the first light. The ship, Leif's ship, sits low in the fjord, its hull creaking softly like something alive and dreaming. Men move quietly along the shore, loading the last of their cargo, barrels of grain, dried fish, tools, livestock, goats bleating, chickens restless in wicker cages. A woman hands up a bundle of wool blankets, her face unreadable, her eyes tracing every knot, every plank, as if memorizing them. She does not call goodbye. The sea hates farewells. Leif stands near the prow, his cloak rippling in the cold wind. He looks westward, beyond the mouth of the fjord where the world seems to end. His hands rest lightly on the carved dragon's head. He can feel the pulse of the waves beneath it, steady, relentless. He has seen what lies beyond the mist, the lands of stone, of forest, of green. But this voyage is different. This time, they will not only find them, they will stay. Behind him, the crew waits for his signal. Some are his old companions from Greenland, men who have shared the terror and beauty of open sea. Others are new, younger, wide-eyed, chasing their own versions of glory. They stand together now, wrapped in wool and courage. Leif nods once. The ropes are cast. The oars slide into the water with a hiss. Slowly, the longship turns toward the west, toward that impossible, whispering horizon. And so begins the voyage into the unknown. For days they sail through seas that seem to breathe, the surface rising and falling like a sleeping giant. The sky changes constantly, 1 hour gray and flat, the next blazing with light. Gulls follow them for a time, then vanish. The air tastes of salt and distance. At night, the sea glows faintly, trails of blue fire where the oars dip, the work of tiny creatures that live in the dark. The men murmur in awe. The souls of drowned sailors, one whispers. The spirits of the deep. Leif smiles faintly. Or perhaps just fish, he says, but his voice is quiet, uncertain. Even he feels it, that thin veil between the world of men and the world beneath. The ocean, endless and indifferent, holds its own mysteries. Each morning, they rise to the same ritual, one man tending the fire in a clay pot at the center of the deck, another checking the lines, another sharpening the blades. The rhythm becomes its own kind of prayer. When storms come, they come fast. One moment the air is still, the next, the world is nothing but wind and water. The sail snaps, the ship shudders, and men cling to ropes until their hands bleed. The sky splits with lightning, white veins across black skin, and rain falls so hard it seems to pierce the wood. In those moments, Leif does not shout. He moves among his men, calm as the eye of the storm. He takes the tiller himself, shouting only when needed, a word, a gesture, never panic. The men trust him because he never raises his voice against fear. He commands it instead. When the storm finally breaks, they bail water in silence. The air smells of iron and exhaustion. Someone mutters a prayer to Thor, another to Christ, another simply to the sea itself. The ship drips and breathes, alive again. They sail onward. The days blur into a rhythm of endurance. The sea becomes both enemy and companion, the thing that threatens to kill them, and the only thing keeping them alive. The men speak less. They listen to the waves, to the creak of the mast, to their own thoughts. It is here, somewhere between Iceland and eternity, that they begin to understand what it means to explore, not to conquer, not to claim, but to endure uncertainty and call it faith. Weeks pass. The air grows softer, warmer. The sun lingers longer on the horizon. The water changes color, from slate gray to green, then blue. The gulls return. The smell of seaweed thickens. One morning, a cry breaks the silence. Land! They rush to the bow, squinting into the glare. At first it seems like a mirage, faint outlines, low hills, the shimmer of trees. But as they draw closer, the shapes sharpen into truth. Leif grips the tiller, his eyes unblinking. They found it again. The land he once called Vinland. This time, he is ready. They sail into a broad bay, calm and bright, where the water laps against the sandy shore. The air is warmer than they remember, the grass greener, the scent of pine and berries drifting through the wind. The men leap overboard, splashing into the shallows, laughing and shouting like boys. Leif steps onto the sand and kneels, pressing his palm to the ground. It's real. Solid. Kind. They begin to build, not the quick shelters of their first landing, but real halls. Timber walls, roofs of turf and bark, smoke holes cut clean through the center. They raise a storehouse for grain, a forge for ironwork, pens for the animals. The rhythm of hammers and saws fills the air. The land answers them with generosity. Rivers full of salmon. Forests thick with game. Vines heavy with fruit. Even the wind seems gentler here, brushing their faces like a hand rather than a lash. At night, they gather around the fire, their faces soft in the glow. No talk of conquest, only of life, of what might grow here, of what stories they'll tell when they return. But the unknown is not done testing them. Sometimes, as the fire dies low, Leif hears noises in the distance, faint, rhythmic, like the crack of wood or the call of voices carried by the wind. He says nothing to the men. Perhaps it's the forest itself, trees shifting, animals moving, the whisper of the new world learning their names. Other times, they find things that make them pause, footprints not their own, sharpened stones, fish traps woven with skill unlike theirs. Signs that this land is not empty. They tread carefully, speaking softly when they go into the woods. They do not yet know whose world they've entered, or how that meeting will shape their own. Still, they work, build, explore. The days stretch golden and long. Leif begins to map the rivers, tracing their paths with small stones in the dirt. He keeps records in his memory, where the soil is richest, where the deer gather, where the wind shifts. He is no longer a raider or a wanderer. He is something rarer, a keeper of a new world's truth. One morning, standing on a rise above the shore, he looks east, toward home. The ocean lies vast and glittering, endless as always. He knows he must return soon, before winter locks the sea. But a part of him hesitates. Here, in this quiet green place, he feels a strange peace. For the first time, the horizon doesn't feel like a challenge, but an answer. He thinks of his father, the man who made exile into empire. He thinks of the generations before them, who fought the sea for survival. And he wonders if maybe, just maybe, his own legacy will be something gentler, the courage to dream instead of conquer. When at last he turns back toward the village, smoke rising from the new halls, he smiles faintly. The unknown is no longer a void to him. It is a mirror, reflecting everything he and his people have ever been, and everything they might become. Soon they will sail home again, their ship heavy with timber and stories. But for now, as the wind sighs through the pines and the fire crackles behind him, Leif stands still, watching the sea glitter like a road made of light. For a moment, it feels as though the world itself is breathing, slow, eternal, waiting. The voyage into the unknown is over. And yet, somehow, it has only just begun. The world grows colder again. The air sharpens, tinged with the clean, metallic scent of the north. The men can taste it in their lungs. Even the ship seems to creak differently, its timber stiffer, its rhythm slower. Days ago, they left behind the green hush of Vinland, turning their prow north to trace the coast Leif had once glimpsed but never lingered upon. They are explorers now, no longer dreamers chasing rumors, but seekers of truth. They have seen the warm lands of fruit and meadow. Now they will meet the other face of the new world, the raw, stony one that speaks in wind and silence. The sea grows restless. Waves rise and fall like great dark shoulders. The sun slips low, pale as a coin. The world narrows to gray sky and gray water, until they blur into one unbroken horizon. And then, one morning, it appears, sudden, almost unreal. Land. A long, broken line of cliffs, stark and hard, rising straight from the sea. The tops gleam with frost. The sides fall jagged into the surf. From a distance, they look like the teeth of an ancient beast, gnawed by centuries of wind. No green greets them here. No forests. No birdsong. Only the ceaseless cry of gulls and the crash of waves. The men row closer, cautious. The water near shore turns clear and cold, revealing stones beneath, flat, gray, polished by ages of tide. Some as smooth as shields, others sharp enough to cut. The ship glides among them, oars whispering in unison. Leif stands at the prow, his hair whipped by wind. He doesn't speak for a long time. When he does, his voice is quiet, almost reverent. This is a land older than memory. The men nod silently. They can feel it too, that strange sense of weight, of time pressing down. The stones seem alive somehow, humming faintly beneath their boots. They beach the ship on a strip of gravel between two cliffs. The air bites at their faces, the cold seeping through wool and leather. Each breath hangs visible for a moment before the wind carries it away. Leif kneels, picks up a stone, and turns it in his hand. It's smooth, flat, veined with white quartz. He runs his thumb along its surface, then tosses it gently into the surf. "We'll call it Helluland," he says at last. "The land of flat stones." The name settles over the group like snow. They explore cautiously, their boots crunching over the rocks. There's a strange silence here. No rustle of leaves, no chatter of insects, only the low sigh of the wind sweeping through the cliffs. It feels as though the land itself is holding its breath, watching them. The landscape is severe, stripped of softness. Low hills of granite, patches of scrub clinging to life in the cracks. Streams run cold and clear, glinting under the weak sun. The sky seems larger here, endless, unbroken by trees. It's a place made not for comfort but for endurance. One of the men mutters, "A hard land for hard folk." Leif smiles faintly. "A mirror, then." They camp for the night near a narrow inlet where the ship rests on calm water. The fire burns low, its light glinting on the surrounding stones. The men eat in silence, dried fish, flatbread, a swallow of mead against the cold. Someone begins to hum an old tune from Greenland, slow, minor, full of the ache of distance. The sound drifts out across the rocks, swallowed by the wind. It fits this place. Helluland is not cruel. It's simply honest. It offers nothing but itself, bare, immense, unyielding. To survive here would mean bending to its rhythm, learning the language of stone and storm. Leif walks alone to the edge of a cliff. Below, the sea beats itself against the rocks, white foam bursting upward like breath from a sleeping god. He stands there a long time, his cloak snapping around him. There is beauty here, though it's a beauty that demands respect. The kind that reminds you how small you are. He thinks of home, the green slopes of Greenland, the warmth of firelight, the echo of his father's laughter. He wonders what Eric would have thought of this place. The old man might have cursed it, or perhaps admired its fierceness. Eric the Red had loved wild lands. He would have understood this one. As darkness falls, the aurora stirs overhead, green ribbons twisting in silence, reflections shivering across the stone. The men watch, wordless. Some cross themselves, others whisper old prayers to Odin and Thor. The lights move like spirits dancing over the sea, a bridge between worlds. In that moment, Helluland feels sacred, not for what it gives, but for what it refuses to give. It holds no shelter, no comfort, yet it stands eternal. A reminder that the world is vast, and men are only guests upon it. The next morning, frost covers everything. The stones gleam under the pale sun, slick with ice. Their boots scrape as they walk back to the ship, breath pluming in the cold. Before they push off, Leif looks back once more. The cliffs rise behind him, still and silent. He takes a deep breath, letting the chill fill his lungs, then exhales slowly. "This land will not remember us," he says softly. "But we will remember it. And perhaps that's enough." They push the ship off the stones, the hull sliding into water that mirrors the sky. The oars bite, the sail catches, and slowly Helluland begins to recede, a gray shape fading into mist. Behind them, the cliffs stand unmoved, watching their departure with ancient indifference. Ahead lies the promise of forest, the next shore, the next story. The men settle back into rhythm, the oars rising and falling like breath. The sea darkens again, but now there's a sense of direction, of momentum. They've touched the far edge of desolation and survived. As night falls, Leif sits near the tiller, his eyes fixed westward. The stars glitter cold and clean above him, each one a point of faith. He traces their patterns by habit, the same way his ancestors did, guiding ships through fog and fear. Somewhere beyond this darkness lies another shore, another name waiting to be spoken. The sea hums softly, as if it knows. He thinks of the stones behind him, hard, enduring, older than time. The world of men will change, rise and fall, forget. But Helluland will remain exactly as it is, long after memory itself fades. And in that thought, there is peace. Leif closes his eyes, the salt wind brushing his face. The ship rocks gently beneath him, the water whispering against its sides. The horizon is invisible now, but he can feel it, steady, certain, inevitable. The land of stones falls behind, and the forested coast of Markland waits ahead. The journey does not end. It simply shifts its weight, as the world always does, from one kind of silence to another. And the sea, ever faithful, carries them onward, west, always west. The air changes first. The men smell it before they see it, that sudden sweetness, that promise of green. It drifts across the waves like a secret, faint but unmistakable. After the barren silence of Helluland, it feels like music carried on the wind. Leif lifts his head and breathes deep. Land is near, he says quietly. And this one breathes. The men row harder, eager now, the oars rising and falling in rhythm. Gulls reappear, their cries sharp above the water. A seal surfaces, curious, blinking black eyes before slipping away again. The horizon begins to shift, a darker line against the gray sky, uneven, alive. By midday, the outline sharpens into truth. Trees, hundreds, thousands of them, crowding the shore in a dense green wall. Pines, birches, willows, their branches heavy with needles and leaves. The coastline runs long and low, the water shallowing near a sweep of sand. Rivers spill from the forest, their mouths glittering where they meet the sea. Markland, the land of forests. The ship glides toward the beach, the water turning clear as glass. Beneath it, fish dart among smooth stones, their scales flashing silver. When the keel grinds gently onto the sand, the men leap out, splashing through shallows, their boots sinking into wet earth. The air is full of scent, resin, soil, something rich and living. It's almost overwhelming after weeks of salt and wind. The men stand still, breathing it in like a blessing. Leif kneels, scoops a handful of dark soil, lets it crumble through his fingers. Good land, he murmurs. The kind that could feed a people. They waste no time exploring. Axes gleam, biting into trunks with clean, satisfying thuds. The sound rings through the forest, echoing like drums. The trees here are taller than any they've known, straight, strong, close-grained. Perfect for ships, for homes, for the long hunger of northern winters. As the day warms, they strip off their heavy cloaks. Sweat mingles with the scent of pine. The forest hums with hidden life, the buzz of insects, the distant call of birds. Somewhere, water moves under cover of leaves, a soft whisper that leads them to a brook running fast and cold. They drink from their hands, laughing, the cold stinging their teeth. This, one man says, wiping his beard, is the first land that feels like it wants us here. Leif only nods. He doesn't trust the word want. Lands don't want. They endure. But even he can feel it, the gentler rhythm of this place, its quiet welcome. They build a small camp near the shore, simple shelters of branches and hide, a ring of stones for fire. Smoke curls upward, pale against the dark canopy. The crackle of flame mingles with the rush of waves. At night they sit together under the trees, the air thick with wood smoke and the faint sweetness of sap. The stars blink between branches, brighter and closer than before. The forest feels alive around them, watching, listening, breathing. Leif sits apart, as always, a shadow among the flickering light. His thoughts drift back to Greenland, to his father's hall, to the sound of wind beating against stone walls. He wonders if anyone there could imagine this place, a world of green stretching farther than any saga had ever dreamed. In the distance, a wolf howls. The men glance toward the trees, hands tightening on axes. But the sound is far, lonely, and fades quickly. The night returns to its rhythm, the pop of the fire, the slow roll of surf, the rustle of leaves. Leif closes his eyes, listening. He can almost hear the land itself, its deep, slow pulse. The next morning dawns bright and blue. Mist rises from the forest floor, curling around the trunks like breath. Dew beads the leaves, glittering in the sunlight. The men move through it quietly, as if stepping into a dream. They follow the river inland, the air growing cooler beneath the canopy. The ground is soft with moss, their footprints vanishing almost instantly. Birds flit overhead, flashes of red, gold, gray. One lands near Leif's shoulder, curious, its small eyes bright. He watches it for a long moment before it darts away. This land is kind, he says softly, mostly to himself. But it hides its teeth well. He's right. The forest is generous, but it's also vast, indifferent. When the wind moves through the trees, it sounds like voices, low, murmuring, ancient. Sometimes the men turn, thinking they've heard footsteps, but there's nothing there. Only shadows shifting in the light. By midday, they reach a clearing where sunlight spills through the branches. In its center stands a fallen tree, enormous, its roots twisted into the air like the bones of a giant. The wood smells sweet, clean. Leif touches it, his hand resting against the bark. "Timber like this could build 20 ships," he says. The others nod, eyes bright. To men who live by wood, this is wealth beyond gold. They spend the day marking trees for cutting, planning how they'll haul the logs to shore. Sawdust clings to their clothes, to their beards, until they smell like the forest itself. That night they feast, fish caught from the river, meat roasted over flame. The fire throws sparks upward, tiny stars joining their larger kin. Laughter rises, deep and full, echoing through the trees. For the first time in weeks, they feel not like wanderers, but builders of something new. Leif sits by the edge of the firelight, carving a small piece of wood with his knife. When one of the men asks what he's making, he shrugs. "A memory," he says simply. It's a small carving, a ship, sails unfurled, waves curling beneath. But on its prow, instead of a dragon, he carves a tree. Roots and branches twisting together, reaching both sky and sea. He studies it a long time, then sets it beside him on the ground, letting the firelight dance across its surface. "Markland," he says softly. "The land of forests. A gift from the gods or from chance. Either way, we'll remember it." When dawn comes again, they load the ship with timber, stacking it carefully in the hold. The scent of pine fills the air, strong and clean. As they push off from shore, the oars creak, the water parts, and the reflection of the trees ripples across the surface like an old dream slipping away. From the deck, Leif watches the forest shrink. The sunlight filters through the canopy one last time, catching the waves and flashes of green and gold. He feels a tug, a quiet ache, the kind that comes from leaving something unfinished. But he knows they must go. The sea is calling again, and the world beyond it is waiting. As the wind fills the sail, the ship leans westward once more. The air grows cooler, salter. Behind them, Markland fades into mist, a whisper of green against the endless blue. The men settle into their rhythm, the sound of oars steady, almost meditative. They speak little now. Each carries the same thought, that they have touched a place where the world itself seemed to breathe differently, where the line between the old world and the new blurred for just a moment. Leif stands at the stern, the carved ship in his hand. He runs a thumb over its tiny wooden branches and smiles. Somewhere ahead lies another shore. A softer one, if the gods are kind. The land of meadows, of fruit, of warmth. The one sailors whisper about in half-believing tones, Vinland. The sea darkens as clouds gather, but the horizon glows faintly beneath them, a line of gold in the gray. The ship moves toward it, steady and sure. Behind them, the forest stands silent, its secrets safe once more. Before them, the wind hums a low, endless song. And the journey continues. West, always west. Toward the edge of legend. The sky that morning is the color of honey poured thinly across the sea. The air hums with warmth, a softness the Northmen have almost forgotten. After weeks of gray and cold, the wind tastes of summer again, sweet, damp, full of promise. The longship drifts on a lazy swell, its red sails slack in the gentle breeze. The men lie against their shields, faces turned to the sun, eyes half closed. Even the oars rest. For once, the sea has given them peace. Leif stands at the prow, hand shading his eyes. He can smell something new, flowers, maybe, or fruit, faint on the wind. It stirs a memory buried deep, childhood days running through meadows in Iceland, the smell of crushed berries on his palms. "Land ahead!" The lookout's cry breaks the stillness. The men spring up, shading their eyes against the glare. And there it is, faint at first, then growing clearer with every heartbeat. A low green coast rising out of the haze, edged with white sand, and beyond it, hills gentle and round, glowing in the light like a dream remembered. They row hard now, laughter breaking across the deck. The oars churn water that sparkles like broken glass. Seabirds scream overhead, following the ship as if guiding it in. When they reach the shallows, Leif leaps overboard before the others, boots splashing into the surf. The water is cool, but not biting. He wades ashore and stops, silent. Grass, real grass, thick and soft underfoot, stretching far inland. The wind stirs it like waves. The air is full of the sound of running water and the hum of unseen insects. The sun is warm against his face. He turns slowly, taking it all in. Vinland, he says, his voice low. The land of wine. The men spread out, exploring. They find groves of wild grapes climbing along river banks, their purple skins bursting with juice. The sweetness shocks them. They've known only the sharpness of fermented drink, never fruit so pure. They fill baskets until their hands are stained red. They find rivers wide and clear, where salmon leap in silver arcs. Meadows carpeted in flowers. Clusters of trees heavy with berries they've never seen before, blue, red, gold. Even the air seems alive, buzzing softly with life. One man, laughing, falls back into the grass, eyes closed. If this is not the land of the gods, he says, then they must be jealous. Leif smiles faintly, though he says nothing. He's wary of paradise. The sea has taught him that beauty often hides teeth. Still, even he cannot deny the feeling in his chest, something he hasn't felt since boyhood. Wonder. They make camp near the mouth of a river, where the ground rises just enough to keep them safe from the tide. They build quickly, efficiently, log walls, turf roofs, fires that crackle bright in the dusk. The air smells of pine smoke and sweetness. That first night in Vinland is quiet. The firelight flickers across tired faces, softening them. The men eat until they can eat no more, fish, berries, and the first meat they've roasted without fear of running short. Someone begins to sing, an old Greenland tune, slow and deep. The words speak of home, of frost and long nights, but here the song sounds different, gentler, as if even sorrow is lighter in this place. Leif listens in silence, his eyes reflecting the fire. He feels the strangeness of it all, the vastness of this new world, the sense that they've stepped not just into another land, but another time entirely. The night hums with unseen life, frogs calling, wind moving softly through the trees. He finds he cannot sleep. Instead, he walks down to the water. The tide glimmers under the moonlight, silver and endless. Somewhere out there lies Greenland, cold and hard, the home he's always known. He feels no longing for it now. Here, the world seems to breathe differently. He crouches by the shore and dips his hand into the water. It's warm. The sea has gentled. The stars above look closer, like lamps hanging low over the world. He thinks of his father, Eric the Red, the man who found Greenland through exile and anger. Leif has found this land through something else entirely, curiosity, perhaps, or hope. He wonders what his father would say if he could see it, the fruit, the meadows, the sun that feels like mercy. Maybe he'd laugh. Maybe he'd curse. Leif smiles. Either way, he murmurs, we came further than you did, father. The days that follow are golden. They build sturdier halls of timber and thatch, store food, and map the land. The rivers run with fish so thick they can be caught by hand. Deer graze at the edges of the meadow, unafraid. They discover that the nights here are long but not cruel. The frost comes late, if at all. When they light fires, sparks rise straight into a sky so clear it feels endless. The men begin to forget to count the days. They live by rhythm instead, work, hunt, eat, sleep, repeat. Some carve runes into stones near the camp, simple marks that say, "We were here." Leif walks often, alone, tracing the rivers inland. He learns the lay of the land, where the soil is richest, where the fruit grows thickest. He listens to the forest's voice, the creak of branches, the murmur of streams, the distant drumming of waves on unseen shores. Sometimes he feels watched. Not in fear, but in the sense that this place has eyes of its own. He sees tracks now and then, bare footprints smaller than his own, a campfire long cold, a broken spear of unfamiliar design. He says nothing to the men. Not yet. The land has its people, that much is certain. But for now, both sides remain ghosts to each other. In the evenings, he sits by the fire, the small wooden carving of the ship and tree in his hand. Its edges are worn smooth now, darkened by oil and sweat. He runs his thumb over the branches and feels peace. This land is not conquest. It's conversation. And he knows, deep down, that what they've found here is not something to be owned, but something to be understood. When the first leaves begin to turn, the air growing cool, he knows it's time. The sea will harden soon. They must return before the winter's grip finds them. The men resist, reluctant to leave such abundance. But Leif reminds them of Greenland, of the people waiting, of the stories yet to tell. "We'll come again," he promises. "The land isn't going anywhere." They pack their ship with timber, furs, fruit dried in the sun, and the vines themselves, twisted strands heavy with promise. When the tide rises, they push off once more. The oars dip, the sail fills, and the ship glides slowly away from shore. The men watch in silence as Vinland recedes, its hills bathed in gold, its rivers flashing like silver threads in the sun. Leif stands at the prow, wind tugging at his cloak. He knows they've found something the world isn't ready to believe. But that doesn't matter. Truth doesn't need belief to exist. He looks once more at the green line fading into mist, and his voice carries softly over the water. "This is not the edge of the world," he says. "Only the beginning of a new one." The sea swallows the sound. The longship moves on, leaving behind the scent of pine and fruit, the echo of laughter, and the first human footprints on a continent that will not know their names for another 500 years. The waves rise gently, as if bowing to the moment, and the wind carries them north again, back toward the cold, back toward memory, back toward the part of the story that will soon be lost to time. But for now, for this heartbeat in history, the world feels whole. And somewhere behind them, the forests of Vinland rustle in the wind, remembering. The dawn in Vinland is different. It doesn't creep through clouds as it does in Greenland or Iceland. It pours, full and golden, spilling over the hills, washing the world in light that feels almost alive. Mist rises from the meadows. The grass gleams wet, bending under the weight of dew. The air smells of sweet soil and sea salt, of wild grapes hanging heavy on the vine. From the timber halls near the river, smoke drifts upward, thin and blue, curling into the calm morning sky. It's hard to believe that this is still the same earth that shaped the Northmen, the same world that froze them, battered them, tested them. Here, everything seems gentler, slower, as though the gods themselves have taken pity on the wanderers and offered them rest. The longship lies moored at the river's edge, its hull half hidden by reeds. It's been months now since they first returned to this place. Not as guests this time, but as settlers. Leif stands outside the hall, watching the light move over the valley. His beard is flecked with gray now, though his eyes remain clear, steady as the horizon. Behind him, the sound of morning stirs, the thud of an axe, the laughter of men carrying timber, the cluck of chickens brought from Greenland. Vinland breathes. They've built their small world here, 3 halls of timber and turf, smoke holes above the hearths, storehouses for grain and furs. The air hums with work. Every man has his rhythm, hunting, weaving nets, tending fires. The women, few but fierce, dried berries on racks of woven bark, their fingers stained purple. the land gives easily. The soil is soft, dark, generous. Crops grow tall and quick, the stalks bending in the wind. The rivers never freeze, not fully. Fish run thick even in the coldest months. At night, when the fire burns low, they eat until full, and the hall fills with the soft murmur of contentment. They drink mead, but sparingly. It feels almost wrong to blur the senses in a place this alive. They sing, though. Always they sing. The old sagas of Odin's wanderings, of Sigurd's dragon, of Eric the Red's fury. But between those songs, new verses begin to grow, songs of green rivers and red fruit, of sunlight that never seems to tire. Songs of Vinland. Leif listens more than he speaks. He's not the kind to boast. When others call him Leif the Lucky, he smiles without answering. He knows luck is a word men use when they can't explain the truth. What he found wasn't luck, it was listening. He spends most days walking the land, charting its moods. The sea to the east, the hills to the west, the forests that whisper even when there's no wind. He's begun to understand its rhythm, the way fog rises before rain, the way the river swells when the tide pulls strong. Sometimes, though, he feels eyes on him. It begins with small things, a snare moved, footprints in the mud not made by any of his men. Then, one morning, as he walks along the riverbank, he sees them, shadows among the trees. Not spirits, not tricks of light. People. Their skin is darkened by the sun, their hair long, their movements fluid as water. They watch him silently from the woods, bows in hand but not raised. For a moment, no one breathes. Then Leif lifts his hand, open-palmed, a gesture of peace. The figures fade back into the trees, soundless. That night, he tells no one. Not yet. He knows fear spreads faster than truth. Instead, he sits by the fire, staring into the embers. The others speak of harvest, of winter preparations, of home. Leif listens, but his mind is elsewhere, on the quiet watchers in the woods. He's seen enough of the world to know this. No land is ever truly empty. Days pass. The forest remains silent. Then, one morning, they find gifts left by the river, smooth stones, carved shells, feathers bound with thin strips of bark. In return, Leif leaves bright beads, bits of iron, and a small mirror. The next day, both offerings are gone. A trade of silence begins, an unspoken agreement between two worlds that do not yet share a language. It continues like that for weeks. The Norse learn which forests to leave untouched, which rivers not to fish too heavily. In return, their traps are never disturbed. The land feels balanced, as if both peoples breathe in time with each other. The men speak of the forest people in hushed tones. Some call them Skraelings, strangers. Others call them spirits, half believing it. Leif calls them neighbors. In the evenings, when the stars spill over the black sky, he tells the younger men stories of home. Of Greenland's harsh winters, of Iceland's fire mountains, of Norway's long valleys. But then he looks toward the door, where warm air drifts in from the dark, carrying the smell of earth and grass, and he smiles. This, he says softly, is what those lands were dreaming of becoming. Life settles into rhythm. Days marked not by conquest or discovery, but by routine, the ordinary miracle of survival. They mend nets, smoke fish, patch sails. Children, 2, maybe 3, born of Norse and Icelandic women, learn to walk on this new soil. Their laughter sounds strange and beautiful against the steady wash of the river. There's joy here, but it's a quiet kind, the kind that doesn't need to shout to be real. Sometimes, when night falls, the men stand outside the hall and watch the aurora ripple over the horizon. It's faint this far south, a pale shimmer like silk, but enough to remind them that the gods still watch. They drink in the silence, the feeling that they have built something at the edge of the world, and that, somehow, the world itself approves. But even in peace, the Northmen never lose their caution. They sharpen blades out of habit, store dried meat for storms that may never come. The sea has taught them not to trust permanence. Leif feels it too. He loves this land, but he never lets it soften him completely. Every dawn, he still scans the horizon, as if half expecting to see another ship rise out of the mist, perhaps from home, perhaps from nowhere. Sometimes he dreams of Eric, his father's voice carried on the wind. "You've found what I sought, boy. Don't let it claim you." He wakes with the firelight flickering on the beams above, the smell of smoke and pine filling his lungs, and knows his father is right. Paradise, too, can bind. When spring returns, the rivers swell, flooding the meadows. The air thickens with life. The grapevines bud again, their tendrils wrapping around the fences. The settlers celebrate with song and mead, raising toasts to the land that feeds them. Leif drinks with them, laughing for once, his voice deep and warm. He feels the ache of belonging and the tug of impermanence in the same breath. Because deep down, he knows they cannot stay forever. The sea will call again. It always does. And when it does, he will answer. But not yet. Not tonight. Tonight, there is fire and laughter, the scent of bread and roasting meat, the glow of torchlight reflecting in calm water. Tonight, the world is generous. And if somewhere in the forest, unseen eyes watch their celebration, they are not hostile, only curious, mirroring the same wonder that brought the Northmen here in the first place. The night deepens. The fire burns low. The sound of the river fills the silence. Leif steps outside, alone, as he often does. The moon hangs heavy above the meadows, silvering the grass, turning every leaf to light. He breathes in the air of Vinland, this place that feels both alien and inevitable, and for the first time, he truly understands what it means to discover something worth protecting. Life here isn't about conquest. It's about coexistence, between man and land, between past and future, between myth and truth. He stands there until the horizon blushes with dawn again, the world washed gold and green. The birds stir. The river murmurs. And Leif Erikson, the voyager who chased the edge of every map, finally feels still. The river is quiet that morning, glass smooth beneath the rising sun. The air smells of cedar and salt. The Northmen's camp hums with small sounds, the crack of wood splitting, the low murmur of voices, the distant laughter of children chasing one another through grass high as their knees. It feels like peace. And peace, in the north, always makes men uneasy. Leif notices it first, not in the forest, but in the rhythm of the birds. They've gone silent. The wind shifts, carrying with it a scent he's come to recognize but never name, smoke that isn't their own. He sets down his axe, listening. The world holds its breath. Then, faintly, through the trees comes the sound of paddles striking water. He calls softly to the others. The chatter fades. One by one, men gather at the riverbank, shields slung across their backs, eyes narrowing toward the dark line of the opposite shore. At first there's nothing, only the whisper of wind through reeds. Then, slowly, the shapes appear. Canoes. Dozens of them, carved from single logs, gliding silently through the mist. Inside, figures stand balanced with a grace that makes even seasoned sailors hold their breath. Bows in hand, feathers at their shoulders, their faces calm, unreadable. The newcomers row closer, their movement so smooth it barely disturbs the water. The sunlight glints on the edges of stone-tipped arrows. Leif steps forward, hands raised in peace. The gesture is met with stillness. A long moment stretches, the kind of silence that trembles on the edge of decision. Then, from one of the canoes, a voice calls out, not in anger, not in greeting, but something in between. The words are strange, rhythmic, like wind through hollow wood. Leif answers the only way he can, slowly, clearly, in the old tongue, naming himself, naming peace. His voice carries across the river, steady as the tide. No one moves. Finally, one of the canoes glides forward. A man stands in it, older, his hair streaked with white, his eyes dark and sharp as obsidian. He says something quietly to the others. The canoes hold their place. Leif watches him. He feels no malice in the man's gaze, only caution, the same watchfulness Leif himself carries when facing the unknown. He steps into the shallows until the water reaches his knees. He draws from his belt a small gift, a knife with a carved handle, and lays it gently on a flat stone halfway between them. Then he steps back. For a long moment, nothing happens. Then the older man nods once. He signals, and one of his people rows forward to take the knife. In exchange, they leave behind a bundle of animal skins and a necklace strung with polished shells. Trade, not war. For a time, this becomes their language, an exchange of goods, of gestures, of tentative trust. The Northmen learn to recognize the visitor's approach by the rhythmic sound of paddles. The Vinland natives, in turn, learn that the strangers with the red sails mean no harm. Days pass. The two groups begin to share small spaces, firelight, laughter, cautious curiosity. The Norse show their iron tools, the sharpness of their blades. The locals demonstrate how to weave nets from bark fiber, how to track game silently through the woods. Words remain elusive, but meaning finds its own path. A smile, a nod, a hand pressed briefly to the chest, signs of understanding older than language itself. And for a season, the two worlds live side by side. But peace, as ever, is fragile. It begins with a mistake, a small one, as such things always do. A misunderstanding of ownership, perhaps, or insult where none was meant. No one remembers clearly later. A Northman's axe missing. A skin of milk taken without asking. A shouted word that sounded too much like a threat. Then blood. Just one life, at first, an accident, Leif insists. But blood on soil spreads faster than fire. The next morning, when the Norse wake, the forest feels different. The air is heavy, the birds gone. By dusk, the first arrows come, black silhouettes slicing through twilight. One lodges in the doorframe of the hall, another in the fence post. No one is hurt. Not yet. Leif orders no retaliation. Hold your ground, he says. We came here to learn, not to rule. But fear is a contagion, and not all hearts are as steady as his. That night, one of the younger men, eager to prove his courage, slips into the woods. They find him at dawn, face down in the river, his blood clouding the water red. After that, everything changes. The settlers fortify their walls, sharpen their spears, sleep with axes within reach. Every sound in the forest becomes suspect, every crack of branch, every rustle of leaves. The laughter that once filled the nights is gone, replaced by whispers and waiting. Then the attack comes. It begins at dawn, when the fog is thick and the sun only a pale smear behind the trees. The canoes glide silently down the river, dozens of them, perhaps hundreds. Arrows hiss through the mist, striking roofs, shields, flesh. The air fills with shouting, the crash of splintering wood, the sharp smell of fire. The Norse fight fiercely, not from hatred, but from instinct. Steel rings against stone. The air burns with smoke and fear. Leif moves through the chaos, shouting orders, pulling the wounded to cover, refusing to let the fire consume what they've built. He sees faces, some he recognizes, others he doesn't, all blurred by the same terror. The attackers move like ghosts, fast and sure, melting into the forest after every strike. When the sun finally breaks through, the silence that follows is heavier than any sound. The settlement stands wounded. Several men are dead, others maimed. The hall's roof is half burned. Leif sits in the ashes, his axe across his knees, his face gray with exhaustion. Around him, the survivors move in silence, gathering the dead, repairing what they can. He feels no anger, only sorrow. The sea taught him long ago that violence is rarely born of evil. It's born of fear, of misunderstanding, of two worlds trying to hold the same ground. He stands slowly, looks toward the forest, and bows his head. "This land has its people," he says quietly. "And we are not them." That night, the stars burn cold over Vinland. No songs rise from the hall, no laughter. Only the creak of timbers and the soft sob of wind through the grass. In the days that follow, the decision comes easily, though it weighs like stone. They will leave. They pack the ship with what remains: tools, furs, barrels of dried fruit, the stories that now cling to their skin like salt. Before they go, Leif kneels in the clearing and carves a small rune into a stone by the river bank. It's not a claim, not a boast. Just a memory, a mark that says simply, "We were here." When the tide turns, they push off from shore. The oars dip, the sail fills. The ship turns slowly toward the open sea. Leif stands at the stern, watching the forest fade into mist. The smoke of their burned hulls drifts upward, a thin ghost in the morning light. Behind the veil of trees, he knows, others are watching, silent, unseen. He raises his hand in farewell. Not apology, not defiance. Just a quiet acknowledgement between those who have shared the same earth, if only for a moment. The wind rises, carrying the ship northward. The men say little. Their faces are drawn, their hearts heavy. But as the shore of Vinland fades, Leif feels no regret. What they found there was more than land or timber or bounty. It was a glimpse of what lies beyond the edge of conquest, a world that doesn't belong to them, and perhaps never should. He closes his eyes, the wind cold against his face, the salt on his lips sharp as memory. The world is vast. And sometimes, the bravest thing a man can do is turn back. The sea takes them again, folding over the wake of their passing. The land of wine slips into legend. Behind them, the forest breathes. Ahead, the horizon waits. And somewhere between the two, in that fragile space where wonder and sorrow meet, history exhales and moves on. The sea is calmer now, though it feels heavier beneath the hull, as if burdened by what it carries. The men move in silence, their rhythm sure but subdued. The laughter that once rolled across the deck is gone. In its place, only the creak of wood and the hiss of waves against the bow. For days, the coastline of Vinland lingers faintly on the horizon, a dark ribbon between water and sky, until one morning it vanishes entirely. There is no ceremony, no farewell. One moment the land is there, and the next it is gone. And with it, something inside them goes quiet. Leif stands near the prow, cloak drawn tight against the wind. His eyes follow the horizon, though he knows it offers no comfort. He has sailed this ocean enough times to know that the hardest part of any voyage is not the leaving, but the returning. The sea changes you. The land waits, unchanged, and that is the crueler thing. Around him, the men speak little. Their faces are drawn, weathered, marked with sun and salt and loss. Each of them carries a story that will never quite be told, a memory of green forests and red fruit, of friendship and fear, of the fleeting peace that once breathed between two worlds. When the wind rises, they raise the sail. It fills with a deep, resonant snap, and the ship begins to move faster, the bow cutting through gray swells that glitter faintly beneath the pale sun. Days pass. Nights stretch long and blue, filled with stars that feel both familiar and strange. The sea hums around them, vast and indifferent. Sometimes the men dream of Vinland, of meadows and warm rivers, of grapes that burst like laughter between their teeth. They wake with salt in their mouths, not sweetness. Other nights, Leif dreams of his father. He sees Eric standing on a frozen shore, cloak whipping in the wind, his voice carried faintly across the water. "You've seen too far, my son. Be careful what follows you home." He wakes before dawn, always with the same chill in his chest. By the 10th day, the weather turns. The sea begins to snarl. Low, rolling swells that build and break, gray clouds gathering like bruises along the horizon. The wind grows wild. The sail groans, the ropes strain. The men lash barrels and crates tight, their voices rising in short, sharp bursts of command. Leif grips the tiller, jaw clenched. He knows this kind of storm, not fury, but endurance. The sea doesn't seek to kill them, it seeks to remind them of what they owe. Rain comes hard, drenching them in cold sheets. The world becomes nothing but motion, the surge of waves, the scream of wind, the snap of canvas. The ship rides the storm like a living thing, rising, falling, shuddering, but never breaking. For 2 days they fight the sea. Then, as suddenly as it began, the wind drops. The clouds thin. The water smooths. The storm passes, leaving behind a silence so deep it almost hurts. The men slump in exhaustion, eyes red from salt and sleeplessness. Leif stands at the stern, watching the sun climb through the haze. The world is washed clean, bright and sharp. And there, faint but certain, a dark shape on the edge of sight. Land. Greenland. Home. The sight of it brings no cheer, not yet. Just relief. The promise of solid ground beneath them, of warmth, of rest. They row the last miles in near silence, each man lost in thought. When the ship finally slides into the familiar fjord, the mountains rise like old gods around them, vast, cold, unyielding. Smoke curls from the longhouses along the shore. Dogs bark in the distance. The air smells of peat and snow. Leif feels the weight of years in that scent, 1,000 memories compressed into a single breath. They beach the ship at last. The men climb out, legs trembling, feet sinking into the black sand. A small crowd gathers, wives, children, traders. Eyes widen. Voices whisper. They had been gone so long that rumor had already buried them. Leif the lucky. Someone calls, half in wonder, half in disbelief. Leif only nods. He doesn't feel lucky. Not in the way they mean. Inside the hall, the fire burns low, steady. His mother, Jodhild, embraces him once, silently. Her hair smells of smoke and herbs. Around her, the walls are the same, carved beams, the same shadows flickering against stone. The world has not changed. Only he has. The men feast at night. The mead flows, the air hums with voices. They tell of Vinland, of its forests, its rivers, its sweetness. The listeners lean forward, eyes shining, half believing, half dreaming. Some already whisper of following the trail themselves, of sailing west to claim their own piece of paradise. Leif says little. He answers questions when asked, but without flourish. He doesn't tell them of the arrows, the fire, the way the forest watched in silence. He doesn't tell them how peace can fracture like ice beneath a careless step. He just says, "It's real. And it's far." Later, when the hall grows quiet, he steps outside. The cold air cuts like a blade, clean and sharp. Above him, the aurora ripples green across the night. The same lights he saw as a child, the same lights that shone over Vinland's forests. The same, yet different. He listens to the sea below, dark and endless. Somewhere out there lies the land he found, the one he left behind. He wonders if the vines still grow, if the rivers still shine, if the people they met still whisper the names of the strangers who came and vanished with the tide. Perhaps they don't. Perhaps they never did. He smiles faintly at the thought. Not bitter, not sad. Just understanding. This he gives, and it takes. It carries stories as easily as driftwood, sometimes ashore, sometimes to the depths. What matters is not what survives, but that it was lived. He feels the ache of distance, but also the peace of completion. Some voyages aren't meant to end in discovery. Some end in returning, and learning to see home again with new eyes. The wind shifts, carrying the faint scent of snow. Winter is coming. The fires will burn low, the fjords will freeze, and men will tell stories to pass the long nights. Among them will be his, half remembered, half believed. The The tale of a man who sailed beyond the world's edge and found a land where the sun never seemed to die. They'll call it a legend, a saga, and Leif will let them, because he knows that truth and legend are twins, born from the same hunger, carried by the same wind. One becomes history, the other becomes song. He turns back toward the hall. The door creaks open. Warmth spills out, golden and alive. Inside, voices rise again, laughter threading through the smoke. For the first time in months, maybe years, Leif Erikson allows himself to rest. Tomorrow, the sea will whisper again. It always does. But tonight, the voyage is over. And yet, in some secret corner of his mind, somewhere between the pulse of memory and the murmur of the tide, the horizon still glows faintly gold. Because journeys like his never truly end. They only circle home. Years pass. Then decades. Then centuries, slow and patient as frost creeping across glass. The sea that once whispered Leif's name still hums in its eternal rhythm, but the voices that sang his stories grow faint. Words are fragile things, after all, and the north is a land of long silences. In Greenland, the settlement endures for a time. Children grow into farmers, traders, sailors. They mend nets, milk goats, carve runes on doorposts. They tell their sons and daughters of a man who sailed west and found a land of warmth and vines. But each retelling grows shorter. First, it's told as fact, Leif went there. He saw it with his own eyes. Then, as time wears down the edges, they say he went there once. And then, finally, as story, there's a tale of a land beyond the sea, where summer never ends. The cold creeps closer each year. Ice drifts farther into the fjords. Trade ships from Iceland come less often. The small colonies of Greenland grow quiet, their halls half empty, their fields pale under the long night. By the time new generations take up their tools, Leif's Vinland has become a dream spoken of beside the fire, a comfort against the dark. And soon even that begins to fade. The sagas change shape. Memory and myth trade places like dancers. In one, Leif becomes a saint, guided by divine light. In another, he's a fool who chased the edge of the world and vanished. In yet another, it was not Leif at all but another man, a cousin, a friend, a nameless wanderer. The names blur. The truth erodes. Because the north has little mercy for what cannot be held. Greenland's settlements shrink, swallowed slowly by snow. One by one, the halls fall silent, the smoke stops rising from the roofs. The last ships that set out for Iceland never return. And somewhere under that widening sky of gray and white, Leif's descendants grow old and die, their bones resting in frozen soil that once held the seeds of their father's ambition. Yet the sea remembers. It always does. Some nights, when the wind blows from the west, the fishermen of Iceland say they can hear strange echoes, faint voices in the spray, singing in a tongue no one remembers. The old ones shake their heads and smile. The Vinlanders, they say softly, as if speaking of ghosts. And in a way, they are right. Because what is a forgotten people if not a kind of haunting? Centuries roll forward like waves breaking on an endless shore. The world shifts. Kings rise and fall. Empires are born from parchment and war. The compass finds its way into sailors' hands. New maps bloom like constellations across parchment. Yet nowhere, not on any chart, not in any scholar's scroll, does the name Vinland appear. The Norse voyages vanish into the soft fog of legend, buried beneath crusades and dynasties, beneath the bright noise of new ages. And yet the story sleeps, not dead, just dreaming. Every few generations it stirs. A monk copying a manuscript pauses over a strange name in the margin, Vinland the Good. A fisherman swears he saw a coastline far beyond the western horizon. A trader finds driftwood on a northern beach, carved with runes that no one can place. Hints, fragments, whispers. But history, once it forgets, does not remember easily. The world begins to believe that its western horizon is untouched, an emptiness waiting to be found. The centuries grow arrogant, convinced that discovery belongs only to the living moment. And yet, beneath all that noise, the truth remains, steady, quiet, unbothered. On nights when the North Atlantic lies calm, when the aurora paints the sky green and gold, the sea still carries the memory of dragon-headed ships cutting across the waves, their sails red against the pale dawn. It remembers men with hands rough from oars and windbent faces turned toward a new world. The sea forgets nothing. It is history's first witness and its last grave. But men forget. When, 5 centuries later, other sails appear on the western horizon, pale and foreign, emblazoned with crosses and crowns, they claim the glory of being first. They call it discovery, not remembering that the water beneath their keels has already been crossed, that footprints already sleep beneath the roots of Vinland's trees. The old songs of the North are long silent by then. The sagas lie unread, their ink fading. The longhouses are ruins, the fire pits cold. But in the wind, if one listens carefully, the echoes remain. A whisper of oars in dark water. A murmur of laughter in a language half swallowed by time. A memory of Leif standing on a warm shore, the sun on his face, the scent of grapes and pine heavy in the air. No one hears it. Not really. But sometimes, when the right kind of silence falls, the deep kind, the kind that carries the weight of centuries, the world seems to sigh, as though remembering something it once knew and lost. And perhaps that is how history truly works. Not as a straight line, but as a tide, advancing, retreating, leaving traces behind. For every discovery, there is a forgetting. For every legend, a truth buried beneath frost. The Viking voyages sink beneath both. Yet their ghost lingers, patient, waiting for the right moment to surface again. And one day, it will, when shovels bite into northern soil, when archaeologists sift through the earth and find nails, rings, fragments of walls. When the world once more stands in awe of what it should never have forgotten. But for now, in this long twilight between memory and myth, the story sleeps. The North lies quiet under its endless sky. The sea murmurs to itself, the same old lullaby it has always sung. And somewhere beneath that gray horizon, in the heart of time's deep waters, Vinland still waits, green, sunlit, eternal, for history to find it again. The centuries sleep. The sagas fade into parchment and song. And yet, the wind that moves over the northern cape still carries something of the old voices, whispers tangled with salt and memory. It begins not with a thunderclap of discovery, but with a question. A question asked by men and women who stand on wind-scoured cliffs staring west. Did they really come here? The year is the 20th century now, a world of engines, wires, and iron ships. The old longboats are gone, their timbers long since melted into earth and sea. But the legends remain. Somewhere, in the back rooms of libraries, in the fragile pages of medieval manuscripts, the story of Leif Erikson still flickers. Some call it myth, a tale of frostbitten dreamers. Others insist it is truth, a thread of history lost beneath the weight of Europe's noise. And then, in the cold northern air of Newfoundland, the earth begins to answer. Lance meadows. A quiet place, far from the roar of cities. Grassy ridges slope toward the sea. The wind smells of peat and ocean brine. It's not a place where one expects the past to speak, and yet, when the archaeologists arrive with their shovels and patient hands, the ground itself seems to exhale. At first, it's only small things. A ring of stones arranged with strange precision. A fragment of worked wood. A nail, blackened with age but unmistakably forged by human hands. Then, deeper still, the outline of long halls buried beneath the sod, their shapes too deliberate, too familiar to be mere chance. The diggers pause, hearts quickening. The wind hums around them, and it feels as though the land has been waiting for this moment, to show its truth, to open its memory. Day by day, the pieces emerge. iron rivets from ships, loom weights, a bronze pin carved in the Norse style, a spindle whorl. Each fragment is small, yet together they form a whisper that grows louder with every trowel stroke. We were here. The archaeologists kneel in the cold mud, brushing away centuries of silence. One woman, Helga Ingstad's wife, and Stein, lifts a shard of worked wood and turns it toward the light. The grain gleams faintly, smooth from an old hand's labor. A Norse hand. It's proof, not legend, not faith, not saga, but fact. For the first time in 1,000 years, the world feels the pulse of that forgotten voyage again. News spreads like wind through dry grass. The scholars who once dismissed the Vinland tales return to their books with new eyes. The skeptics falter. The storytellers smile quietly, because they always knew. The excavation deepens. What they uncover is not a city, not even a village, but a camp, a foothold carved into the edge of the world. The turf walls rise again in their imagination, the long fires burn, the sound of hammers and laughter echo faintly across the centuries. They find the marks of ironworking, proof of ship repair. They find the remains of butchering, bones of caribou, of seal, of fish. They find a small spindle for weaving, suggesting that women were there, too. And with each discovery, the line between legend and history fades until it disappears altogether. Standing there in the northern wind, one can almost see them, Leif's people, moving between the halls, their cloaks rippling, their voices blending with the gulls. The smell of wood smoke and salt. The faint rhythm of hammers. The laughter of men who did not yet know their story would be forgotten. The archaeologists rebuild the past carefully, piece by piece. Their work is patient, reverent. They lift not only earth, but time itself. And when the outlines of the Norse halls are finally traced in full, curved walls, central hearths, the slope of a roof lost to centuries, the world stands silent for a moment. Because here, in the quiet soil of Newfoundland, myth has become fact. Leif Erikson's journey was real. 500 years before Columbus, the North had already touched the shores of America. No flags. No conquest. No grand claims of empire. Just curiosity, courage, and the longing to see what lay beyond the edge of every map. It's a truth that humbles as much as it astonishes. When the first photographs are taken, the mounds rising from green earth, the archaeologists small beside them, they seem almost like ghosts standing beside ghosts. The grass moves in the wind the same way it did when the Norse first stood there. The sea murmurs with the same voice. The light falls the same. Time folds in on itself, and for an instant, the 1,000 years between them collapse into nothing. In the evenings, when the diggers rest, they light small fires against the cold. The smoke rises into the Arctic air, just as it did a millennium before. And sometimes, if the night is still, one could swear the flames flicker with old colors, red sails, golden mead, the glint of iron under a green sky. The past, it seems, never truly dies. It just waits for someone to listen. The site at Lonseux Meadows becomes a threshold, not a monument to conquest, but a conversation between centuries. A reminder that discovery is not always about arrival, but remembrance. Visitors come now, standing where the Norse once stood, listening to the same wind, looking out at the same horizon. They run their hands over the rough turf walls, over the stones blackened by old fires. And though they cannot see the longships that once anchored in this bay, they can almost hear them, the creak of wood, the rhythm of oars, the low murmur of voices speaking in a language the sea has never forgotten. The archaeologists finish their work, but the story does not end there. It grows again, alive once more in the minds of those who walk this place. Children hear of Leif Erikson and his voyage, not as myth, but as the first whisper of a truth that history misplaced. The sagas breathe again. In libraries, scholars trace their fingers along the old runes, the words that once seemed fanciful now carrying the weight of evidence. Vinland the Good, the old phrase no longer poetic, but literal. The world, at last, remembers. And yet, even as it does, a quiet sadness lingers, the knowledge that so much had to be forgotten for this rediscovery to matter. That the songs of those who first walked these shores were silenced by centuries of neglect. But perhaps that, too, is part of the story, the way history ebbs and flows, the way truth hides beneath waves and waits for the right light to catch it. As dusk falls over Lanceaux meadows, the wind grows colder. The sea glows with the soft silver of moonlight. Somewhere out beyond that horizon, invisible but eternal, lies Vinland itself, the land of warmth and wine, still breathing in the memory of the earth. The dig site quiets. The archaeologists pack their tools. The last of the sunlight spills across the grass, gilding the mounds that once were homes. The north is silent again. But this silence feels different. Not absence, acknowledgement. The sea hums, soft and endless. The same song it sang to the Vikings 1,000 years ago, now carrying the story back to the world that almost forgot it. And beneath that song, the ground itself whispers, steady, patient, sure. We were here. The northern sky hangs wide and pale. The grass over Lanceaux meadows bends gently, whispering to no one in particular. The ocean lies beyond, gray-blue and endless, the same sea that once bore dragon-headed ships and men with restless hearts. 1,000 years have passed since the first keel touched these shores. The sagas that once spoke of it have been read, forgotten, doubted, rediscovered. Empires have risen, fallen, burned to ash. Yet here, in the hush of this lonely northern air, the story endures. Because the wind never forgets. If you listen, truly listen, it will tell you everything. It will tell you of the fjords where the longships were born, carved from trees that had never known fear, polished until they gleamed like wet stone. It will tell you of oars biting through black water, of men whose hands blistered against wood but never faltered. It will tell you of a red-haired exile who found a home in ice, and of his son who found another beyond the horizon. It will tell you of courage that asked for no witness, of discovery that sought no crown. Leif Erikson and his crew did not cross the ocean for glory. They crossed because something inside them refused to accept an edge to the world. They crossed because the human heart is shaped like a sail, always straining toward whatever lies just beyond sight. The wind remembers that, too. It remembers how they stood on the shores of Vinland, awed by the warmth, the green, the fruit that grew wild and free. It remembers how they built, how they laughed, how they met the eyes of strangers and tried, for a brief moment, to live in peace. It remembers the arrows that flew, the fear that rose, the decision to leave, not in defeat, but in understanding. And it remembers how the ocean took them back, silent and endless, carrying their story like a seed tucked beneath the waves. For centuries, that story slept. But the sea keeps no secrets forever. It waits, patient as stone, until the world is ready to hear again. And when the spades of archaeologists bit into the cold northern earth, the wind sighed in relief, as if saying, "Finally you remember." It is easy to think of the Vikings only as warriors, raiders with axes and flame. But that is the surface of the saga, the part carved loudest in the wood. Beneath it lies something quieter, truer, the dream of distance, the ache for what might lie beyond. They were the children of a harsh world, yes, but also its poets. They built ships not just to conquer, but to connect. Each voyage was a prayer spoken in wood and wind, let there be more. And in that prayer they found something timeless. Because discovery is not about maps or ownership. It's about wonder. The same wonder that burns in the eyes of anyone who looks toward a horizon and feels the faint pull of something greater than themselves. That is the true inheritance of Leif's voyage, not the land he touched, but the idea he proved. That there is always something beyond. Even now, as waves roll against forgotten shores, that truth remains. It hums in the sea foam, in the cry of gulls, in the sigh of pine forests that never knew their names. The world turns, restless as ever. The sky fills with machines instead of sails. But the heart that drove those first ships forward still beats in us. Every step into the unknown, every question, every act of courage, every quiet moment of awe, carries their echo. And perhaps that is what immortality truly is. Not statues or monuments or songs shouted to the heavens, but a whisper in the wind, soft, unending, passed from century to century like a torch no storm can snuff out. Here, on this quiet northern shore, the grass bends and straightens again. The air smells of salt and wildflowers. The waves slide gently across the stones, the same rhythm that once guided the longships home. No one here wears armor. No one shouts in triumph. Only the wind speaks now, and what it says is enough. It says, "They came. They saw. They crossed the edge of the world and found it was not an end at all, but a beginning." It says, "The sea forgets no names spoken in courage." And it says softer still, almost like a blessing, "Go if you must. Wander. Seek. Wonder. But remember, every horizon you chase was first imagined by hands that rode through darkness and believed in dawn." The wind moves through the grass and slips back toward the sea. The tide rises, touching the old stones where fires once burned, where men once stood staring west. The sun lowers, turning the ocean gold. For a heartbeat, the world feels the same as it did 1,000 years ago. The same light. The same sound. The same boundless question breathing just beneath the surface of things. And if you close your eyes, you can almost hear them still. The faint creak of oars, the low hum of a song carried by waves, the laughter of men who dared to reach beyond the map. Their story drifts not in books or monuments, but in the air itself. In the truth that has always lived beneath the wind. Because history, when it sleeps, dreams in tides. And sometimes, on quiet northern nights, it dreams of red sails, of salt and courage, of the moment when the edge of the world became a doorway. And so, the journey ends as it began, with the sea breathing against the shore, the wind whispering through the grass, and the memory of those who once followed it west, beyond the reach of fear, into the eternal light of discovery. And now, as the last waves fold into themselves and the night begins to settle, let that wind carry you, too, softly, endlessly, toward your own horizons. For the story is finished. But the voyage never truly ends.